and we'll go through some examples of this very shortly. Okay, so we are recording. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about why we might want to record embed questions and videos. Why might you be interested in that? Actually, let me just stop the share for just a second. Why might you be interested in trying to add questions? And maybe we could do a quick round of introductions. John Kane, Economics Department in Self. And Karen, it looks like, oh, you might be talking to somebody. So, okay, Renee?
Renee Landis Jennings, a senior associate in residence life and housing.
Okay, and have you ever added questions and videos before?
Oh, and again, just like the previous one, we did polling. It's more for RA training and trying to do some training before they get here and being able to see if they get what we're trying to grasp by video and having some takeaways that they actually did the work and where we need to work on when they physically get here on campus.
And we've all done that wonderful training through HR that everyone's been so pleased with repeating again. But for a one-time iteration, it's a really good way of doing training, and it makes sure that people not only watch things, but they learned enough from it to be able to respond correctly to the questions. Okay,
Right.
Rebecca?
Rebecca Peters in anthropology. I've got my first asynchronous course that I'm developing this summer. And I really think the questions in the videos are going to give the students something to do, instead of just, sit there and have me yap at them. Even though I will make really short videos, they still want to do stuff.
And it also helps if you're teaching asynchronously. It's also a good way of humanizing the instructor, providing a sense of instructor presence and a little bit of interaction, even if it's not synchronous interaction. At least they feel they get to know you a little bit more that way. Okay, Karen, I know you were getting a phone call or something. Okay, Kate.
Hi, Kate Sullivan, School of Business. I teach business law. I would use it probably to help keep them engaged throughout the videos a little bit more.
Okay. Karen? Well, let's go to Ben. Ben?
Yeah, I'm Benjamin Ogo, CTA department. I've been using videos for my classes, but this time I saw this particular topic and felt it could be a new thing to try, especially since we use it for HR stuff and see how it's done, really. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and Karen? Okay, well, if you can come in later and jump in at any point. This is going to be a somewhat more informal presentation because it's the end of a long week and I'm not as well prepared as I'd like to be too. But in any case, so I think a lot of the things I put up were things that you already mentioned. Well, if you're going to flip your class and you are teaching in person, this is a really good way to get students to watch a video in advance, give them some questions about it. Especially if it goes into the grade book. It could be a tiny portion of their overall grade, but students will do a lot of work for like 0.1% of 1 point on their scores because they're not always taking into account the actual impact on their grades, and it can be, sometimes extrinsic motivation can be good. But the other thing is, if we're watching videos, I know sometimes myself, I'll be watching something, but thinking of something else, especially during times of a pandemic. But if we know we're going to be asked something about the video, it brings our attention, it keeps our attention a little bit more focused. And that could be helpful. The first time I actually answered questions like this, I took them quite a few years ago, where it was on behavioral economics, and there were questions in the video, which sometimes were asking about concepts you were supposed to learn. But the other thing it did was, before there was an experiment, the instructor would ask you what you predict the outcome would be. And then they actually reveal the outcome. And it also is a form of, it could be used as a form of pre-testing, where you commit to something And then you get your actual response later, which may be different. What actually happened may be different than what you expected, but that type of thing activates prior knowledge. It makes you more receptive to learning. And once you've committed to a viewpoint and you find out you're right or wrong, you're much more likely to remember that than if you just sit there nodding and agreeing with everything as you watch the video. So there's a lot of ways in which this could help encourage learning. And, you know, from the standpoint of our students, sometimes they'll be listening to something. They might be listening to a lecture in some classes. They might be watching a video and it might all seem to make sense, but it might turn out they missed something because they weren't focused and during a portion of the video. And this is a good way of giving some students feedback immediately that no, they didn't quite get it. And it's a way of letting them sometimes go back and review those concepts before they move on to the next concepts, even in the same video or something else. And, you know, I actually started putting videos in my online classes back in 1997 or so. They were pretty low quality videos, but one of the things I looked at was who actually used them, because we had statistics on that, or at least in some applications, we had statistics on that. And what happened is I noticed that the only students who were watching the videos were the students who pretty much all had A's in the class. And, you know, it would be nice to think they were getting the A's because they were watching the videos, but I think it was probably more of a self-selection issue, that the students who were really focused on the concept, who either really enjoyed the class or were really focused on getting high grades, were the students who used them the most. And they were generally the students who needed them the least. So I wanted to encourage students to start watching videos and actually testing them while they're watching videos. The most popular tools for embedding questions in videos right now are PEdPuzzle, PlayPosit, Panopto, and Panopto is popular primarily because in campuses that have it, it's a free tool. And there's also TED-Ed, which is used much more in middle school and high school, but it is a tool we'll at least talk about a little bit. PEdPuzzle has grown quite a bit, partly because it's free, and it has an interesting pricing scheme. It's used a lot in high schools, but more and more colleges are using it too. You get free storage for 20 videos, but if you start referring other instructors, you gain additional storage. So it's a little bit of a pyramid scheme, but it's a pyramid scheme where you just get more access if you bring more people into the pyramid. If you do want to have more videos than that, you can pay $11.50 a month for unlimited storage, and then you get more analytics. The question types with PEdPuzzle are multiple choice, open-ended, or you could have notes embedded in the video. PlayPosit is the one I actually chose because for my purposes, it had the most features. It's a bit more expensive. It's a free plan where you could have 100 learner attempts per month, which could be one video with 100 attempts, or it could be 100 videos with one attempt on each. But since I teach classes generally with 300 or 400 students in them, that wouldn't quite work. So I bought the unlimited plan where I can post as many videos as I want, and students can take as many attempts as they want, and so forth. And it also allows for the equivalent of clicker software. I haven't used it in that way, but when we didn't have access during the pandemic because we could no longer use the classic version of iClicker Cloud, and it took CTS about 1.5 years to upgrade to iClicker Cloud. We didn't have any way of doing real-time polling type questions, and this provided a way of doing that. But we do have iClicker Cloud now, so I wouldn't use it for that purpose. What I liked about it was the large range of question types. You got multiple choice, free response, simple polling questions, multiple select. There's also fill in the blank, which can be automatically graded. You can also embed discussions in videos. You can do vocabulary matching questions where you have an array of terms on one side on the other. You can also embed web links in it. You can also do fancy branching where, depending on how people answer a question, it will take you to different portions of the video. So if students answer one question correctly, they could go to a segment further ahead. If they answered incorrectly, they can go back to a segment where they have more review sessions. So it's really, really flexible and powerful. And the main reason I got it compared to some of the others was it will accept LaTeX input. So I can embed questions that have math symbols in them and equations in them. And that's really, really helpful when I teach classes in econometrics. Panopto is the easiest one in many cases to use because it's free. The question types we can use are true, false, multiple choice, multiple select, or fill in the blank, and they're all auto graded. And right now we have LTI integration with the Blackboard gradebook. In the fall, we'll have LTI integration with Brightspace. We don't have it yet, so we're in a transitional stage. But if you are teaching a summer course, you could embed questions in the Blackboard gradebook, but you'd have to set them all up again when we move to Brightspace, so I wouldn't recommend that. I'll share the slides with you at the end. There's links to instructions on how to set up the quizzing tools or the Panopto video quizzes well, both in Blackboard and Brightspace later. TED-Ed is a tool that's used a lot in middle school and high school. It's basically a plan where you take YouTube videos, you take a chunk of portions of some, you can do a bit of mixing together and embed questions in it. Any that you create then become available for other people. You can create classes, and it's a somewhat clumsy interface, but it is free. We're not going to talk as much about that. And those are the basic options. But what I'd like to do is show you some examples. And if you could log into Blackboard, we're going to go through just a little bit of what things would look like from the student side if you embed some questions. And then we'll talk about some ways in which we can do the embedding. So if you go to Blackboard, click on Community Groups and go to CELT, and then click on Content. And then if you scroll down, one of the options here is the Embedding Questions in Videos workshop. And there are a few examples I put in here. The first example is a Panopto example. Then I have two examples from, well, actually I only have one. I was about to put in one when someone came in and interrupted me. I was going to add a second one, but there's an example there. And here's an example from PEdPuzzle. Now, here's the other example. I did get the second PlayPosit example in. I've got probably 150 videos or so, I think, in PlayPosit, all of which were created during the pandemic. But what happens from a student view is they get to the course, they see the quizzes, and you're welcome to try any of these. Because Panopto is integrated into Blackboard, the quiz is already in here, and grades would automatically upload to the Blackboard gradebook if this was a course rather than a community group. So what would happen is, well, it's going to go into the editing mode for me, so it's not going to look exactly the same. But if you try it, you will see the video. And what will happen is, you notice here, I have two quiz questions embedded in the video. Essentially, you either create a video in Panopto and then you edit it. And when you edit it, you have the options of adding quizzes to it. And each question in Panopto is called a quiz. But what happens is all of the quiz questions in a video become a single score that gets uploaded and integrated into the Blackboard gradebook. And the way it works basically is, here I have two questions embedded at 57 seconds and at 1 minute and 30 seconds. If you create quiz questions in Panopto, one challenge is it only does this to the nearest second. And that's a little bit, if you have the video created in advance, you have to be very careful to leave at least a few seconds at the place where you want to embed the question. The other tools for PEdPuzzle and for PlayPosit give you the ability to control the entry point of the question to 1/100th of a second, which will allow you to get it in between words or even in between breaths and so forth. So it gives you much more fine tuning. And if you try this yourself, you'll see that the questions did end up right between words because I didn't do this too carefully. I just uploaded a video I already had and roughly inserted a question, but you can get a feel for what it's like. And if you click on the question, you'll see what the editing, I guess I have to go into edit mode to actually show you what it looks like to edit. And here's, I guess I put in, I was playing with this before. We're going to delete the second question. I was trying to move it and that was unsuccessful. But if you click on the quiz question, you get the interface. Well, I don't want to play the video there, but what will happen is when you get to that point, the quiz question will pop up, and this is what the answer looks like. Well, apparently I deleted the actual question rather than the my attempt to move it. But let's say this is a sample question, and you just simply choose whether it's multiple choice, true, false, or multiple select. I thought there was also a fill in the blank, but I guess not. So true, false, multiple choice, and multiple select are the options. This would be, let's say, answer A. This will be answer B, and I'll let answer A be correct. And you could add additional questions here as well, where we click add answer. And let's say this will be answer C, and we put in some words obviously there. And then if you want, you could put in the correct answer explanation so that after students answer the question, they will get feedback explaining why a specific answer was correct. And when they play it, they can get up to the point, it will ask them the question, and it will give them the choice of either going back and reviewing it again and doing the question again. And they could basically do it as many times as they want until they get it correct, and you could give them feedback or not. And it's a pretty simple interface. Panopto is kind of a blunt instrument. This was an actual question, and there apparently is the actual, this was the actual question, where here's a question, and these are the options you get to do. You could choose whether or not you let people retake that specific question, whether you could choose whether or not to show them whether they got it correct after they answered the question, and you could allow them to review the correct answers and explanation. And in particular, you could block them from going forward until they answer the question. So you've got a number of options there. And that's pretty much it. And if you want to add new ones, all you would do is you'd go back into the edit screen that we were at before. We go to quizzes, and you would just click add a quiz. And that's why I doubled it up before, because I put another one at that point, and let me delete that. So what you would do is you would play this to wherever you wanted the question. You might zoom in a little bit, and let's say we want to put a question there where that is in fact between words. You can see the gap in the audio. You could listen to it up at that point and see what you want it to say. And then at that point, you would go in and choose quiz, add a quiz into the question, and that would be one additional quiz question on this particular video. Once you're finished, you would click, apply it, even though that's not quite done. And now there's 3 questions, 2 of which won't make a lot of sense. And we're going to close the editor. It's going to re-render the video. In just a few minutes, it will be available for students. And that's how you basically do it there. You would enter this from the integration, the LTI integration, but since Blackboard is going away, I don't think it would be very helpful to focus too much on that. But let me just pause for a bit. Does anyone have any questions?
I do, John. This is Rebecca.
Yes.
So I got into one of these videos. I think your sample quiz is what it's called. And it seems to me that, so what I'm looking at, just like you had on the left, details, contents, captions, discussion, and then there's these little like suitcases looking things, or maybe it's supposed to be a clipboard, where it says like where the quiz questions are and the minutes and everything. It is letting me like skip the video part and just go to the quiz. It's letting me skip the video entirely and just click on that part of it and do the quiz. and then I've gotten the question wrong and it's letting me just go back and it's showing me the answer.
Well, because that's the way I set it up just for this purpose. You can remember there were those options about you can choose to allow students to see the results or not. You could disable that. Students will always have the advantage to skip over and get to the question, but you can choose to allow them to return and try it again. You can choose whether or not to display the answer. Honestly, I would never use this tool myself, which is why I'm using PlayPosit, because I like the controls that are built into PlayPosit. And I'll demonstrate that, but you can do a lot of that. It's just kind of rough. And Panopto is a great tool to produce quick and easy screen recordings. And if you just want to insert a question or two and just make sure students do it, you know, you could give them the option of redoing the questions. You could give them the option of seeing feedback or not, with or without the ability to redo it. Or you could just make them take it and only see the score when it shows up in their grade book. So, you know, you can change those options a bit.
They can always navigate straight to the question. That's always going to be
that will always be an option. But if you don't let them retry it, that will be at their cost. So there's not much we can.
In PlayPopto, or is that what it's called? PlayPosit, is that one where they can also skip to the quiz?
In PlayPosit, you get to choose that. And actually, let me show you that, because I want to show you what a really good interface looks like. Let's go to PlayPosit. And because PlayPosit isn't integrated with LTI, I still use it anyway. Students have to join it separately. And what I do is I shared in that Blackboard community group. If we go back to the community group here, if you want to try the PlayPosit examples, I activated a couple of them just for this demo. But what you have to do is click here and create a free student account that will put you in this class and give you access to these 2 questions. Now, that's, you know, it takes a few minutes, but it's but with classes, I can upload the whole roster of students and they get invited to it, they join, and then they're in for the rest of the semester. And then I have to upload the grades. And with 400 students, that takes a few seconds. It's not really all that bad because they can download them in as an Excel spreadsheet and upload it. The main problem is students will not always use their college email address. When the class of 400, there's always going to be 5 to 10 who will use a Gmail address or something else, which will not allow me to sync it with the gradebook. And then I'll have to contact them individually and tell them to stop doing that. And generally by the middle of the semester, they will, but it's in the meanwhile, I have to manually convert those 5 or 6 students to the correct email address. Otherwise, the whole process of uploading grades takes about 2 or 3 minutes. But for those students, it adds a little bit of time, just looking up and matching their email addresses. But leaving all that aside, let me show you what the options are in PlayPosit. If we go to one of these videos, this is one I don't think I shared. I just shared 2 of these just for the purpose of this workshop. But if we go, this is a video. It's actually one of the videos I use in my class. So the questions already came over. But what you can do in the setup of the video is in the interactions, you have, let me see where the settings are. There are settings you do for the whole. Here we go. These are the playback options, which you set for the whole the video. So one option is when they get to an interaction, because the interactions could be discussions, you could put a discussion board at a certain point in the video and participate in that. It gives you a nice threaded discussion. So they're not just questions, but you could let students rewind, but they'd rewind to the beginning of that segment, and then they'd have to watch that whole segment again. Here's the option to skip interactions where they could just go right past it and move forward. You could allow people to fast forward. I turned off those options. Now, so I'm making students, if they get a question wrong, go back and rewatch that portion of the video and take it as many times as they want to. They could leave it with an incorrect response and, get less than a perfect score on this, but most students would rather get a perfect score. So if they don't get a correct answer, they just go back and listen to that portion again. And that happens maybe 20% of the time or so. And it happens less and less as the semester goes on. You could let them retake the whole video if they're not happy with how they did, if you want. And I do allow them to do that. And I do allow them to increase the playback speed, so they can go to double speed if they want. And you could hide the learner score after they finish, but I don't see any reason for that. I let them see how they do. So those are things you set for the whole video. And then basically what happens is you move on the timeline and you choose, well, let's say, suppose I wasn't happy with where this particular point was. If I, this video, well, yeah, let me move over to, as the editor of this, I can see where this is. Now, let's suppose I put this question. Matches up quite nicely. Okay, so that's where the question pops up. But if I want to edit that, I would just go in here. That's actually a different point. 541, that would be this one. So if I wanted to move this, what I could do is I would click edit, and then it shows me the question, but I could adjust the timing, and I can adjust the timing here by going to advanced by, again, hundredths of a second. So it gives me really fine detail here. So I think it was, this probably just went off, but let's say I might want to put it at 539.05, like that. And that's where it will be. And then I probably want it to end at the same point, so it will just stop at that point. But you could stretch it out over a longer interval, and then it would just pick up after that. And that's where that question now is. And basically I would go through and play it and make sure that's where I want it to be. And you can fine tune it again to hundredths of a second. And then if you want, you could put in a block of questions at that point by simply choosing add an interaction right before or after. So you could have a sequence of questions at that. Or you could move it to the next cluster of questions or to an earlier question if it better fits. And that's, and then you could review it, check it all out and so forth. And this is where you can, again, adjust the settings on that. So this is, this is my preferred system. But the nice thing is when I go into the questions, let me go back to a specific question there. If I want it, well, let me just pick another point and I'll just throw one in here, and it's going to be kind of garbage, but I'm just going to say add an interaction. These are the options I get: multiple choice, free response, which can be graded. You can leave it so it's auto graded if it's a fill in the blank. But if you have a free response where students might write a paragraph or two, then everything is graded except for that. And then you manually grade it, and then the score is determined. But you could also put in a poll where you could ask them to vote on options. You could do something where there's multiple select, the fill in the blank. You could embed a discussion forum right in the middle of a video so they could discuss something that they just heard. You could put in a link to a website that they could go to at that point with other resources. You could just throw in a pause and, and do some other activity there. And there's a whole bunch of things you could add in addition to that. My interactions would, that requires an institutional one. But if I want, let's say I want to throw in a multiple choice option. So I'm going to throw in a multiple choice. But the nice thing here is, for my purposes, that I've got the math equation. So now I have a LaTeX editor with both some symbols as well as the ability to type LaTeX freehand. So if I want to type in, say, beta 1, for example, I meant to do that. There we go. And so what did I do? I did the wrong slash. So beta 1, beta sub 1, I got to, I can basically type in LaTeX and get math equations directly embedded. And you can also, of course, add in the label. So you can put in a label, which it would be the for screen readers and so forth. So, you would then put in the appropriate labels and you would have that. And then you have for each answer, I'll put in a bunch of nonsense answers again, just because apparently that was a duplicate. But then you have the option where you can choose it to be correct or not, but you have the ability to add a jump. So you could jump to another place in the video if they pick one answer or another. So you could give them customized video feedback if you really want to. I haven't done a lot with that aspect of it, but it's nice to know it's there. It's by far the most flexible thing I have. I'm going to cancel that one just so it's not making this one too ugly. And basically what happens is the way this works, because it's done outside of the LMS, is if I go back to the PlayPosit menu as a whole, they call these bulbs, but basically what happens is you create these video interactions by grabbing videos from anywhere. They could be videos you upload, but typically the videos on YouTube or videos on some other web hosting service, which could be your own, or they could be anybody else's. And then, well, we actually have to go here to my bulb. So what you would do is you would create a new one. And if you want to, you could grab somebody else's video, or you could import the URL for a video that you have. You could upload the video directly. You could do it with an audio file, or you could record a live video where you're doing a screencast. And these are by default, it will automatically allow you to search YouTube or Vimeo. You'd have to input the URL if it's on any other hosting service. Now, if we had an institutional account, we'd also be able to grab all these other ones, but we don't. So I'm limited to things that are out on the public web or videos I upload. And you upload captions, which you always should do to keep your work accessible. And then you can also trim and crop the video. So if there's a video you have online, or you use someone else's video, you could just choose a 30-second segment of it, for example, embed some questions on it and get students to interact. Now, I've chosen to only use videos I've created, but you don't have to do that. You could use videos that anybody has created. And so I'm showing a bit more with PlayPosit. PEdPuzzle works in a very similar way. It doesn't have quite as many options, and you are limited to 20 videos unless you pay about the same price as you pay for PlayPosit. I think that was $11.50 or so a month, and this is $145 or $144 for the year. But it gives you a lot of options. So let me just do a quick search. Let's say I want to go out on YouTube, and let's say I want to search for something with let's say 2 stage least squares for econometric. I don't know if there's any twos. There we go. So you could go out there, grab a video, it's going to initialize it, and then you have it, you go on the timeline, and you just choose customize. And now you can choose to, well, you could upload, see what captions are out there. It will automatically download them if they're already on YouTube. We'll get the auto-generated one. I have no idea how good they are, but you could always edit them. And then you could, this is the first time I've actually used someone else's video on here. And then you could trim and crop it so you can see where you want it to begin. And we probably might want it to begin where the video actually began. Or, if you choose to, you could just take and do the first 5 minutes. Let's say the first 3 minutes of it, and then you're done. Or you could go to advanced, and then you could choose the starting and ending points, and you could snip out different portions of it and grab parts of it. So we'll just say done, and we have it. And then you would just go in and add interactions. You'd watch the video, and you could either use one of the default templates or just create your own. So you'd watch the video, you go to the point where you want to ask a question, you would choose add an interaction, and so forth. And that's all you would need to do to create a video. So again, I've only used my own, but there are so many videos out there. I would just feel awkward at it, using someone else's work as a basis for a video, but in some cases it could be really useful. If you want to look at advertising or, images used in advertising, using videos of advertisements that are out there might be kind of helpful. So let me stop talking at this point and just go over any questions or concerns or anything else. We can go over any aspect of this that you'd like, but my students have loved this. In course evaluations, this is one thing they found really, really helpful. And it is a bit of work creating the videos. Adding questions to them is relatively easy. you know, compared to the actual work in putting videos together. What questions do you have?
John, do you know how Panopto is going to interface with Brightspace, where we're going to be able to get it?
Yes, that Panopto will be added. We should have pretty much all the integrations we have now. It's just a question of gradually adding them. Right now, the only integrations that I'm aware of that are working in Brightspace are the Lumen Learning Waymaker integration. McGraw-Hill is working as of last Thursday at about 4:35 when it got it working in time for using my class to open, because I am using their adaptive learning platform in my class. The Norton one is not quite working yet, but it should be really soon. And I think there's one other integration that's working, but they'll be adding them. On average, a typical college had 200 integrations, and I think they're up to about 4 or 5 across SUNY right now. And they're doing the most critical ones, but they'll all be there sometime this summer. And one of the first ones they'll be doing will be Panopto. So, and that should include the video quizzes.
Can you
And if
do
there's
the,
video, oh, go ahead.
can you do the other people's videos in Panopto at all, or is that? no?
Well, that gets a little bit tricky. You can't directly do it. The only way you could use other videos is if you download the videos, and there are some copyright issues with that unless you get permission. So if the video is released under a Creative Commons license or is released as a public domain video, and or if you get the permissions of the copyright holder, then you could download it. YouTube generally only allows you to download your own videos unless you use one of those software packages that will let you download any videos, or you do a screen grab of it. But technically, you probably shouldn't be uploading other people's content unless you have permissions, or unless the permissions of the content allow other people to use it.
Okay, it sounds like it would be a project anyway, to do that.
It works best with video. Panopto works best with videos you create.
Right.
Or that you have access to the original videos. Now, I mean, there could be some cases under fair use where grabbing a portion of a video or, using a small excerpt for teaching purposes might be legitimate, but the law there is far from settled, and you get very different interpretations depending on, on who's making the case. One of the things I've often done in class is have short video clips that illustrate economic concepts, where it's just a 2-minute clip from a movie, and I will play it in class and have students answer polling questions. I haven't done this with video questions for remote learners just because of those copyright issues. It's a little bit, copyright holders tend to be a little bit more restrictive, even if it is restricted in the LMS. The law is not entirely settled there, and we get very different opinions depending on who you talk to, or whether you're talking to a lawyer for a publisher, or whether you're talking for lawyers for educational institutions and so on.
Yeah, I was more talking the mechanic.
Yeah, basically though, yeah, with either PlayPosit or with PEdPuzzle, basically it takes videos that are already online and builds an interface and an overlay to that takes that portion of the video and embeds the questions on those public videos. But it is creating a copy of it on their server, basically. So if the video goes away or is modified somehow, you still have access to it. But with Panopto, the video has to be on the Panopto cloud, and it does not have the capability of bringing in videos from other hosting services. So, if you just want to create videos and add a few questions to it, Panopto can work reasonably well. You just don't have the same editing or fine-tuning capabilities. But if you create a video where you're planning to insert a question, all you need to do when you're recording it is to pause. Or if you're using a little bit of editing software, you could insert just a bit of spacing at that point, and then you don't have to worry too much about that fine tuning. I tended to create the videos first, get the audio cleaned up on them, edit them, and then post them. And then I added the questions, but I generally did not leave enough of a pause in them for the questions. So that ability to adjust the timing by, by hundredths of a second was kind of useful for me. And that's partly because I hadn't planned for that. Well, I hadn't built that into the timing of the video when I recorded them. And I suppose after 30 or 40 of those videos, I probably should have started doing that. So I could have been a bit more careful. But basically, I wanted to have videos that work with the course or without it, and where I might change the questions or where I put the questions in the future. Because what happens is you can use the same videos and then put in different questions every semester or in different sections of the course, or you could move the questions around and sort them. All you have to do is drag and drop them to a new location or change the time mark. And that works with either PEdPuzzle, or with PlayPosit. Other questions? The cheapest and easiest way will be Panopto. But I'd suggest if you use it, you just make sure that when you're planning the videos, you allow spacing, or you just pause more. I tend not to do that, as you may have noticed. As long as you leave, a second or two pause in between places where you might put in a video, it shouldn't be too hard to adjust it on the timeline. Other questions? The first time I added questions to a video was about 6 years ago. I had videos, as I said, for a few decades now, but the first time I added some questions, I was going away for a conference, and I got notification. I was going to miss a Thursday class with a class of 400 students, and I got notification that my flight was changed from 7 at night until on the Tuesday before that, until to 10 in the morning, just a few days before it. And then that meant I wasn't going to be able to be there for my Tuesday or Thursday class. And so I decided I didn't want to miss 2 classes in a week. So I recorded some videos. I did it with Camtasia. I embedded them and I uploaded them in it as a SCORM package. And that's a lot of work, and it takes up a lot of storage, and it's kind of clunky. And at that point, actually at that conference, I saw presentation by people with PlayPosit, and it just seems so much easier and intuitive. So, I got a license and started using it. But PEdPuzzle is free as long as and if you want to start small, PEdPuzzle is a really good way of getting a flexible system and building it in. Panopto is a free way where there's no limit on how many you put in. But the editing capabilities are limited. Sorry.
Did you pay for the PlayPosit one out of pocket, or did you use like your department funds? Or
yeah, I paid for it out of pocket because it was just easier than trying to get permission from somebody. But it could be something you could ask your department to pay for, maybe, or ask a dean. I actually did make some attempts to try to get the college to buy it as a license, but it's kind of expensive. I think it would have been about $5,000 for all the faculty here to have access to it, plus a couple of $1,000s, I think, for setup. So it was a lot for something that they weren't sure people would use. I think there's 3 or 4 of us actually using PlayPosit. We did it after I came back. We had a presentation by them, and I think a couple other people got it. I think they may have had their departments pay for it though. But it is an annual license, so you do have to pay for it every year. It's not a one-time thing. But again, Panopto is free. PEdPuzzle is free. Again, as long as you just use videos stored in Panopto.
And John, with Brightspace, do the different SUNY campuses, are they able to elect different things?
Yes.
Okay, it's not just all SUNY all the time.
No, although they'd like it to be. And the reason they'd like it to be is that they are trying in each category of software to negotiate contracts for one platform. And by doing that, they'd be able to get lower pricing for all of the campuses. They are going, originally they were debating between 2 platforms for video, but Panopto bought up the other company, which is why they've agreed to go with just Panopto. So since there really was no other choice for a tool at that scale, that is a platform that all campuses were using. There is you may have seen a note I sent out about a month and a half ago about an IITG grant for large class instruction, where there was going to be some tools that would be acquired that people could apply to use and get some training on this summer. One of those tools is PlayPosit. And we don't know which tools will be selected, but there's right now about 25 tools that are being considered. The people who receive those grants will be viewing these things and narrowing down probably to 6 or 7 tools. It's possible that Panopto may be one of those, in which case people in the pilot would be able to test that. And then if that was adopted by SUNY, there could be a contract in the future, but we're not anywhere close to that at this point. That would be at least a year away before, well, this summer we'll know which tools there'll be. A year from now, we'll know whether SUNY will be negotiating contracts with some of these vendors. So, but everyone will have the Panopto option in SUNY.
Thank you.
Cool. And Panopto does get better. Every year they add a few new features to it. Any other questions? I was hoping to demonstrate the process of integrating a Panopto video, but it just doesn't make sense to do it in Blackboard since we lose that capability really soon. And we can't, I was hoping we'd have the ability to do it in Brightspace, but again, it took longer to get Brightspace up and running, and everyone just got access to it 2 days ago, I think it was, wasn't it? So yeah, so it's early, but by the fall, things will be in much better position. Okay, I do see there's something in chat I may have missed. Okay, Renee, any other questions? Okay, well, if you do have any questions with Panopto, with EdPuzzle, or a PlayPosit. By the way, I should know that both PlayPosit and EdPuzzle do have browser plugins. And whenever there's a video that happens to be loaded into the browser in Chrome, at least, it will ask you if you want to make it in EdPuzzle or PlayPosit video, and then you could very easily add it to your list of objects. So, okay, I guess that's it. I'll stop the recording.